Good evening. I'm going to call to order the City Council business meeting for September 6, 2016. May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Mayor, all present, duly noted.
Thank you. Would you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have a number of things to do to begin our meeting this evening. Some of them are very enjoyable. Others can be, I think, a bit reflective. And one of those that I believe is reflective is I want to share a little bit with you and recognize a departed member of our former city councilor. Robert Lee Larson, known all of his life as Bob, passed away on Saturday, August 20th. Now, Bob was a former city council member, first elected to the city council from District 5 in 2002, serving from January 2003 to April of 2005, when Bob had to resign due to moving from District 5 to another council district in Newberg. Bob was again elected to the city council from District 6 in 2006, serving from January 2007 to April 30th, 2010. When he resigned from the council. During the time Bob served on the council, he was elected council president in 2008 and 2009. And Bob served on numerous council advisory bodies while serving on the council, notably our Budget Policy Subcommittee, Public Access Cable TV Subcommittee, Pharmacy Take-Back Committee, the Newberg Area Management Committee, Judicial Review Subcommittee, Justice Recruiting Subcommittee, and Affordable Housing Ad Hoc. A memorial service is scheduled for September 10 at 11 a.m. at the West Chehalem Friends Church. For those that want more information, there is an obit in the Newberg Graphic. And I would ask that we pause for just a brief moment of silence in remembrance of Bob. Please, if you'd join me. Thank you. I appreciate it. We have presentations and proclamations this evening. And the first one, we're starting something new, or a little bit, handling it a little bit differently. And we want to recognize those individuals and those organizations within our community that are contributing to the all-over welfare of our community and providing services to our entire community. And we want to kick this off tonight, if I may, with a letter of recognition of service rendered by the Family Life Church of Newberg. Is the Family Life Church, is there a representative with? Aha! All right, I would like to read part of the letter that we have, that we provided for this, if I may. On behalf of the city and the entire community, I want to recognize and thank the Family Life Church for your generous and selfless ongoing service projects in support of the community. Your congregation's website, the welcome on the website, states your vision well. Quote, everything we do is intentional to connect with our surrounding community and family, close quote. Throughout your recent Serve the City campaign, Family Life worked in teams throughout the city to power wash the downtown sidewalks, clean up several parks, served residences of the Newberg Nut Tree Ranch Mobile Home Park, and helped assemble over 300 lunches and dinner packs for Love, Inc. And of course, your sponsorship of the fireworks display at the Old Fashioned Festival is greatly appreciated. Family Life Congregation is a shining example of service to all Newberg, and we are thankful for your generosity and service. Signed by the mayor on behalf of the city and saying thanks to Family Life Church. Would you please step forward? This next letter, or actually it's a proclamation, this actually even kind of dates me. And I have a proclamation here for George Fox University, and it's a proclamation declaring an anniversary for George Fox. Do we have any representatives from George Fox with us this evening?
We do, sir.
Would you join me, please? You're going to represent everybody.
There's a number of George Fox people here.
We'll come to it. We'll get the numbers up here. A proclamation declaring September 9, 2016 to April 29, 2017 as the year of George Fox University. Whereas, in September 1885, Quaker pioneers in Newberg established the Friends Pacific Academy with 19 students, including former U.S. President Herbert Hoover. And whereas, on September 9, 1891, academic leaders opened Pacific College with 15 students, and whereas in 1949, the institution changed its name to George Fox College in honor of the founder of the Quaker or Friends movement. And whereas in 1990, George Fox added graduate programs and enrolled more than 1,000 students for the first time. And whereas in 1996, George Fox merged with Western Evangelical Seminary and became George Fox University. And whereas this fall, George Fox enrolled 4,000 students. And whereas George Fox University alumni have contributed to the betterment of the world as pioneers in the invention of the heart valve and in the television, as well as serving humanity in education, healthcare, social work, ministry, engineering, nursing, and many other fields. Whereas George Fox University enriches Newberg cultural life through art exhibits, musical and theatrical performances, NCAA athletic competitions, and academic lectures. And whereas George Fox University students and employees annually provide more than 300,000 volunteer hours to Newberg and nearby communities. And whereas George Fox University, its students, guests, and employees annually contribute more than $1 million to the local economy. 100 million. Thank you. Whereas, and whereas George Fox University, its students, guests, and employees annually contribute more than 100 million to the local economy, and whereas George Fox University is a top-tier university bringing Newberg volunteer assistance, economic benefit, cultural benefits, and enhanced labor force, and other positive contributions. And whereas, on September 9, 2016, George Fox University celebrates its 125th anniversary and reaffirms its promise that every student will be known personally, academically, and spiritually. Now therefore, the City Council of the City of Newberg hereby proclaims from September 9, 2016 to April 29, 2017 as the year of George Fox University of Newberg, and encourages all Newberg citizens to join in this observance. In witness whereof, I have set my hand on the cause of the seal, be affixed this 6th day of September 2016. Congratulations, George Fox University. I do invite, who do you want? First it's him, now it's you. I was going to invite you to say something. Please, we would love to hear from you.
It'll be short, but thank you. We really deeply appreciate it. It's difficult, I think, in many ways, as you know, to separate Newberg and George Fox University. I'm a historian, so I spent a little time in the library and archives this morning. The city of Newberg owes much to its original friends, settlers of the community. In 1875, many of you know, William Hobson, the great Quaker pastor, came to the present site of Newberg, and he climbed up on Chehalem Mountain, and he said that in his journal that this was the place he wanted to build a community. He caught a vision, he said, for the future of the valley as he looked around, and many of you may have heard this quote. A beautiful valley, now filled, he said, in the future with prosperous homes, Friends quarterly and yearly meetings established, and a flourishing town with a Friends College. Now, obviously, it's much more than Friends, as we've seen this tonight from Dave Benson's church and many others that have settled in Newberg. He also believed that the area would be a great place for farming and fruit raising, and that's what many of the early Friends pioneers did. In addition to Hobson, you had people like Ezra H. Woodard, who was the first editor of the Newberg Graphic and president of the first board of trustees for Friends Pacific Academy. Jesse Edwards, who owned most of what you now see, 80 acres in this part of Newberg all the way down to the river, and the Edwards home is the home that the president of George Fox lives in. And it was then the center of Newberg, and of course later became the land for the French church, the land for the college, although it didn't become later the land for the college, right? But it provided much of the historic grounding for the community, and we're proud to live both in the center of Newberg and in the community at large. I was reading this morning, in 1924, the Newberg Graphic issued a special edition of the newspaper suggesting that the college was an essential part of the future development of Newberg. In the paper, it talked about the cultural and educational system became a draw for citizens of other communities, and it remains so today, I think, for many of us. In 1891, as the mayor has already said, we started with 15 students and a vision for an excellent education that's grounded in the Christian faith. This fall, we greeted 2,400 students on the undergraduate level, a record for us, and more than 4,100 students actually overall to the university. So from 1986, when we had 500 students, quite a change in the last 30 years. Our mission and vision remain the same today as they were in 1891. Our commitment to Newberg also remains strong as well. Thank you for your recognition of our 125th anniversary, and we look forward to many more years inextricably linked to Newberg, because we're proud to be its citizens. Thank you very much.
Congratulations on 125 years. Thank you. Now, at the prerogative of the chair, we are going to be in recess for at least 15 minutes, and we have a young lady that is going to cut us a cake, and we're going to celebrate 125 years. So we are at recess. I don't have Aren't you going to have a piece of cake? Brian?
And that's the one you use it for. What do you use for
Just the green.
okay. Put it on the back of my neck. Like I told you, I didn't realize how big the knot was. Got away. It's getting there. But it's still something.
It feels better, right?
Yeah, well, it's like it almost hurt if I don't get it.
We can't say that. Huh? We can't say it.
It sounds like a bad that's bad. Oh, boy.
If the councilors would take their seats, please.
You hear that? Really? That's like Obama.
He wasn't paying attention. He's nowhere to be found.
That's the third piece, Councilor McKinney? Oh, the fourth one.
We can get seconds?
I think there are probably enough there. Your third one too, huh, Dave?
Well, I can see why.
All right, I'm going to call this city council meeting back to order. And with that, I would like to move into the city manager's report, please.
Mayor and council, Johan, city manager. I'll try to go quickly, but it's been 3 weeks since our last meeting, so there has been a lot that's happened. Probably would like to just start by saying we have a star among us, and that Jay Harris completed or competed in or survived Hood to Coast. Yeah, so 100-degree weather. So a number of things that have happened. We had an outreach meeting with the Greens that Councilmember Essen helped set up, about 50 people there. Gave an update, but primarily it was around the bypass to answer a lot of questions of where we were and where we're going. So I think it was positive. And then one part of the meeting, we asked them about emergency preparedness. And I think later in the meeting, you're going to see some things that the mayor is going to suggest that we do that. The response was just very positive. Also did an update to, this is part of just this outreach and I'm going to tell you some exciting things about that in a second, but an outreach to a Methodist men's group yesterday with about 20 of them, just talking about things that are going on in the city. The person with the least longevity in Newberg was 10 years. And so you can imagine with Rennie name in the middle of it and Chief Blodgett that there was a lot of experience in that group, but it was positive. Been working with the Downtown Economic Development Work Group. They continue to make progress, and you'll see another update in writing with them of all their tasks. Continued with the biweekly meetings with the Downtown Coalition. And a lot of that I was talking about public art at the grant that they received. You've seen the first part of that, which is the wrapping of the wine barrels with a new technology, and it's from a local company where they print an art piece on it that can be original art, and then they wrap the wine barrels. So kind of interesting, that money was from Waste Management. And then we've also been working with them, Doug and me also, and Mike Ragsdale, about trying to encourage some new businesses in town. And of course, we've got several that are opening up, including the Steak and Fusion in Old Pasquale's. They look like they're about 2 weeks away from that. You see the Emery's that are completing the renovation on those. So we're really, if we get our way, trying to bring to them possible Italian restaurant. Now, of course, they'll make the choices, but we're working that. And then across the street, the Passamores are working on the recently vacated offices for children and youth services, family services, and looking at some different options there. We talked with the Chamber, Downtown Coalition together, and then Rob at the Culture Center about the transient lodging and some of the ideas to come forward to you in the next month. Did 4 employee visits. This is part of the program of me meeting with each of the employees in the city and sitting down and hearing about their ideas and then bringing them forward, both to the whole directors, but just some things that just have been around for a long time that we can just make happen, like new signage coming into City Hall was a suggestion that we're going to do there. We met with a local business talking about maybe a renewed opportunity in the insurance for the city and looking locally first. Met with the Historical Commission members and the society to look at new initiatives that they might, as a volunteer commission, do in helping us with historic preservation. And then goes everywhere from seeking the historic designation process with the Cameo and the library and some of those, but also looking at ways that they might generate money that then could pay for other things where they are the leader of it. And we'll come back with some real interesting things with that, including historic prints and maybe and hopefully a Lego model for sale of Newberg City Hall. So we're kind of excited with that. Attended the graduation of one of our interns that we had, internship run out of the chamber. It's a student from George Fox. She's a senior this year and worked in with the city in the clerk's office and continues to work that even after internship, where we made some funding available. Worked with a couple of folks in talking about affordable housing and some initiatives. And then this is in advance of what will be proposed as a affordable or a housing symposium, where we're inviting 10, no, won't be that many, probably 8 different agencies to come here and to engage with the city and the community about housing options for us. Met with the Mid and Willamette meeting of city managers, just sharing information, particularly about the new legislative session that are coming up. We're working with the Accelerator. This is our entrepreneurial space that CPRD very graciously is hosting. This is the place where we have 2 businesses in there now, or startups that are trying to work and just bring us to a whole nother level of entrepreneurship and business. And we're looking at some of the surplus equipment that we have, just office thing in the city, that by a transfer from us to CPRD will then be able to help out the Accelerator service. So that's going on. We work with representatives from the state on the State Trade Act. And why this is important is these are the folks that have been tasked with helping the people out of West Rock. And we started it about 220 people. A number of them got jobs, a number of them just retired out of the system, but they're down to somewhere between 25 and 50. And so we reached out to them and say, the people that are left, how can we figure out some training program of businesses here? And we started with one very specifically to help Dundee find an individual, and we believe we have that can use on-the-job training dollars that could come in and help Dundee for their wastewater treatment. We've volunteered that as we can to train the person, and that does us good, and it also helps to make sure that our neighbor in Dundee continues on, because they have one operator, and it takes over a year to to train someone to get at the basic operator system, and there's 3 levels in that program. So we're pleased about possibly that happening. Talked to the interim director of Love Inc. of how Love Inc. and the city can work in some partnerships, and particularly in emergency preparedness, of exploring some of that. We also talked about a new cell tower provider that's looking at us, but what's unique about this one is that their proposal is to come in with Wi-Fi. So we all know about when we take our phones and our iPads, but this may be a partnership that could work out, that if it goes and there's a suitable location, that could extend Wi-Fi, and particularly with the school district's initiative to place a smart device in all of our young people's hands by the end of next year. This could be the answer of extending Wi-Fi to them, where if they cannot afford the internet through other providers, they could get that service. So we're very excited about that, and we're now waiting for a proposal to come back with that. Probably one of the other big ones is we met with State Lands, with the governor's representative there, and Karen was kind of led the city's effort there, as Doug has in the past. And this is to work through the issue of allowing the Graymore development to occur, and to resolve a conflict between between the developer, State Lands, and the Corps of Engineers about how a creek that's there can be relocated and still serve as a creek that meets all of the rules of the federal government and the state. I'm hopeful after that meeting, even though this is the 3rd one that's happened, that we think we've got a resolution. So we'll continue that, and hopefully the next meeting we're able to report that that's done, and that could provide some other answers to things like potential locations of other businesses that might want to come to the city on their site. And then the other one, and I'm very pleased, and some of the directors don't know this, but Leah does, before you just heard, is that we made an offer, and after interviews, and Rosa will now be our community and your community engagement staff person. So we're real excited to get her on board and get her with the council and do some interviews and make sure that your vision for community engagement now happens. And she's just a wonderfully talented, enthusiastic person who's done so much for our Hispanic community and for the city. And I think she'll bring that drive and creativity to the city's program to get the message of the city and the council out to the community. Mr. Mayor.
Any questions or comments for the city manager? None appearing. Thank you for a very thorough report. With that, we're going to move to council appointments. And you have before you the appointment to the Newberg Library Board of William Paul Headley for position 4 for a term from September 2016 to June 30, 2018. Pleasure of the council. Councilor Bacon.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we approve your appointment of William Paul Headley to position 4 on the library board.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Corey? Is there any further discussion? Question has been called for. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. None appearing. Congratulations, Mr. Headley. We thank you. Is there anything you'd like to say? I'd like to have Paul stand up if he would, so you know who our new board member is. Thank you again for putting in your application.
I'd just like to say I'm honored to serve in this capacity. The library's been a huge part of my life ever since I was a small child. Hopefully I can help support that
Thank you for your willingness. I sincerely appreciate it. And with that, we're going to move into the area of public comments. In the area of public comments, we ask the people that have some issues they want to bring to before the city that are not already on the agenda, either in the consent calendar or other areas, that they keep their remarks to a period of 5 minutes. And with that, I'm going to invite Miss Judy Durkee to come forward. And if you push the silver button on the right, that'll turn on the mic, and please introduce yourself and then your presentation.
Okay. I'm looking on the right. Okay. I'm Judy Durkee. I live on Carroll Avenue here in Newberg. And I was recently involved in a process for an accessory dwelling unit that is going in across the street from me into the corner. And I had some concerns about that process, and so did some of the other neighbors as well. So I just wanted to talk about the concerns that we had. We did not see that it was really a fair and equal process.
Say again, please.
We did not feel that it was a fair and equal process. First of all, what was sent out to us beforehand was not real clear what was planned, what the gentleman was planning to do. It had a brief explanation, but it really wasn't very clear. And I don't think the process for him was understood very well as well. There were workers over there prior to the meeting for the approval of the permit. At the time of the meeting to approve the permit, I didn't hear anyone make it clear as to at what point in time he could take the notice down, the sign, or begin working. That evening after the meeting, he went and pulled up the sign, and the workers were there the next day. It was later that I got a letter which said that after the time for appeals to be filed, that is when they could begin. So I don't know if it was really clear, and I know it wasn't clear to me at what point in time he could begin working on that unit, and at what point in time he could not, what he could or couldn't do. And I think that's something that probably needs a little bit more clarification. There was a staff report. I'm not sure exactly of the role of the person doing the staff report. There was a written report and then there was a verbal report. And in the verbal report, he put up parts of the code that related to the accessory dwelling units and the parts of the code that he felt were being met. He did not put up all the parts of the code, only certain parts that he was addressing. He noted that it was a large unit. However, the accessory dwelling units are supposed to be a maximum of 1,000 square feet, and this particular one was a little over 1,200 square feet.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry to interrupt, ma'am. I know this went before the Planning Commission. I have not heard
Right.
whether anybody's appealing, but if there is an appeal, it would be to the council.
Right, I am not appealing, I am talking about the process.
Okay, and that's great to talk about the process, but if you start talking about the substance of the decision, which you started to
No, that's
delve
not what I'm talking
into.
about. I am talking about the staff report did not note the square footage on this unit, and that it was over what is recommended by code.
I
And I'm
just-
not sure whose
if I could
responsibility
just
that
finish.
is.
Ma'am,
It's-
let the city attorney
If
finish,
I could just
please.
finish.
Okay.
I just want to caution the council that this could be an ex parte communication if we start talking about the substance of the decision versus just the process that occurred.
Okay, I'm just talking about the process. And I'm wondering who's responsible to determine whether or not those units meet the code. I'm the one that noted it was a large unit. And in the verbal, and I sent in a letter stating that, and then during his verbal report, he did note that it was a large unit, larger than the 1,000 square feet required. But it wasn't in the written part of it. So the question is, he also noted that 4 letters that were not in objection to the unit, but he did not note the letters that were in objection to the unit. So it seemed like I'm not sure what his role was, whether his role was to figure out how to make this work for the gentleman, or if his role was to be nonpartisan and say, okay, these are the people that are for, these are the people that are against, these are the way he meets the code, these are the ways he doesn't meet the code. If his role is not to do both sides, then I think you need somebody from each side looking at something looking at how does it meet it, how does it not meet it, and whether or not it should be approved. After I talked and looked at ways that it did not meet the code, his comment was not positive. We were also not given equal time to talk. The homeowner was given 15 minutes, the contractor was given 15 minutes, people were given 5 minutes to talk, then the homeowner and contractor talked again. We were not given then an opportunity to address the inaccuracies in their second statements. And I think we should be given equal time, not necessarily 15 minutes each, but in equal time to respond to their second statements, because they were not accurate. So that was of concern. And the cost to appeal is prohibitive. I mean, it's 900 and something square dollars. So it's a lot of money to try and appeal something. I'm not going to appeal it. I don't know if anybody else is appealing it, but I think it needs to be looked at as it really wasn't a fair and equal process. So that was my concern. And we were told repeatedly that we have to adhere to the codes, you have to adhere to the codes. And then in the discussions, there was discussion of bending the codes.
So you're bringing to us
Yeah.
just the process. You're concerned
Yes.
about the process.
Yes, I think the process itself needs to be a little more fair and equal. Whoever is for the city, what is their role? Is their role to figure out how he's meeting the
Well,
codes
that's
or
something
not?
we have to, but you feel
Right.
that the process needs to be examined.
I do.
Thank you. Any questions from the council? No comments or questions? Thank you
Okay.
very much. Appreciate it. And Mr. Damian Talbot, please.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I have my cohort with me. I'll have her identify herself first.
We do not have an application for your cohort.
I'll
I'm
make
going to
sure
have
she
to have
fills
a
one out.
long discussion with you, aren't I?
I thought I'd got everything right this time. I'll have her identify herself for the record.
Thank
though.
you. Please continue.
My name is Suzanne Miller, and I'm with the Newberg Peace Alliance.
And Damon Talbot tonight representing Newberg Peace Alliance. A couple weeks ago, I spoke, after Denise Bacon had spoke to the council about an event in September on the 21st. That event was going to be that following weekend, and unfortunately, just scheduling conflicts have made that not going to be doable this year. So we're going to put forth a lot of effort to make it happen next year and do it in a much better way to represent the Native American population and some of the things that we want to address in regards to them. However, we have put together some events on the 21st, so we just wanted to let you be aware of those. The first will be a march that will occur at noon. It'll begin at the Francis Square Park, and we have not quite determined whether we're going to go to Memorial Park or to George Fox University. We're still working out those exact details. The other part of that is we are going to have Newberg Peace. As a part of the Newberg Peace Day, we're going to have an Acts of Kindness Day. What this is many of you may have seen different things around where people will say, hey, I went and got a cup of coffee at Dutch Brothers and someone paid for my coffee. And we want to make that go that whole day just all over the community. People buying each other lunch, washing people's cars, helping carry groceries, whatever type of thing you want to do, that'll help your neighbor and you'll help others. So we're putting together some plans on how to make that happen, how to track it, and using Facebook and some other tools. One of which is using just the hashtag online if any of you do social media of Newberg Peace. So that's going to be the entire day on September 21st. And as I said, we'll be doing a march at noon from Francis Square. We're going to start meeting at 11 so we can make some signs and stuff like that. And we'll be passing out some buttons in regards to the Kindness Day. Also, on the 24th, since we're not doing our event, we want to make everyone aware that Sherwood is doing a really big presentation. I'll let her tell you a little about that because she knows a little more detail on the Sherwood
All this is
event.
going to be contained within 5 minutes.
Yes.
Thank you.
First of all, thank you very much for the great dessert. Appreciated that. This Act of Kindness Day that we're using to celebrate the International Day of Peace is really an effort of citizens and organizations. And the organizations include Rotary, which has as one of its main focuses world peace and conflict resolution, the Newberg Peace Village Day Camp for Kids, and the George Fox Center for Peace and Justice. And the Rotary Club's been very involved here and also in Sherwood, and just wanted to let you know that Sherwood as well is planning a big festivities on the 24th. And this whole effort is growing worldwide, and you can Google International Day of Peace. It's now reaching at least 21 million people in about 130 countries. And we think Newberg already has a great community, a leadership role in peace, and we want to see that continue. We would like to use this response and show the statewide media what a community can do to focus on the positive with all the terrible negative news we've had all summer. So that's what we're all about. We wanted to make you aware of it tonight, and thanks so much for your time.
And just in closing, I have given Sue Ryan, the city recorder, a copy of our flyer to distribute to each of you, so you'll have all of the information available. And we are also going to prepare a possible proclamation for you guys to do at the upcoming city council meeting, and I'm going to be sending that to the city recorder later this week as well. So we appreciate your time, and hopefully some of you can make it to the march, and if not, at least do something kind on the 21st. Thank you.
And put it on Facebook.
Any questions or comments for the presenters? None appearing. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And be sure and fill out one for yourself, please. Thank you. We move to consent calendar. Pleasure of the council. Councilor Corey?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the consent calendar.
It has been moved and seconded. Woodruff? Yes, sir. Woodruff on the second. Is there any further discussion? Question's been called for. There is no further discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. None appearing. Consent calendar is adopted. With that, we move to a public hearing. And in this public hearing, this is a legislative hearing, and we will be considering a resolution authorizing the council authorizing a repeal of Newberg's Municipal Code Section 10.2.050 regarding volunteer bicycle registration. Do I have any abstentions, conflicts of interest, or objections to jurisdiction on the part of the council? None appearing. I need a staff report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Truman Stone, your city attorney. This is brought to you tonight as a ongoing effort to remove obsolete portions of the code and to generally modernize the code and clean up areas that need cleaning. This one, in researching a different topic related to bicycles, I came across this provision about bicycle registration, which I was unaware of, and I discussed it with the chief of police. He indicated that there was a time that the police department was registering bicycles locally, but when a national bicycle registration became available, it was more efficient, had better coverage, and so they stopped taking registrations locally. And that was about 3 years ago. The information about the national program is in the staff report. The sole purpose of this ordinance is to repeal the provision that directs the police department to maintain a local registration. I will note that this was not published a week ahead of this meeting, so this will either have to be simply a first reading tonight, or I would have to read the entire ordinance into the record. And with that, that concludes the staff report.
Clarification, if I may. The entire ordinance, or read the action that we're taking in total?
The entire ordinance.
Thank you. Questions for staff? None appearing. I have nobody signed up to provide any oral testimony, so I'm going to open and close the oral testimony. Are there any communications that we've received from the outside, any written communications?
No, sir, we have not received any for this ordinance.
Thank you. So with that, I would ask for the closing comments from staff and your recommendation.
No further comments. I do recommend that the council repeal this provision since it's no longer being followed.
With those recommendations, I'm going to close the hearing, and we're now into a period of deliberation. This is a first reading. It was not published early enough to avoid a reading of the entire ordinance. You can tell me how many paragraphs the ordinance contains?
Well, it's on page 18 of your packet. It's a full page, or 3/4 or more of a page. I will say there's no urgency in,
Wait, I want to register my bike.
no urgency from an administrative perspective.
The entire ordinance is on page 18?
That's correct, Mayor.
All I have on there is repeal. That's my page 18.
That is the ordinance 2016-2808 is an ordinance repealing section 10.20.050.
So it's one line.
Well, I believe the entire document, including the recitals, would need to be read as well.
All right. Pleasure of the council.
Fine. I just want to get this done. I would move that is it pass or repeal? What's the proper
You're out of
language?
order.
Oh,
We
I'm
have to
sorry,
do a
Mr.
first
Mayor.
or a second reading. That's the question before you. All right. Having seen no need to expedite this, then this will be the first reading, and this will come back before us at the next council meeting for the second reading. Thank you. So with that, I need to make a note. And that is what, on the 16th, 17th, 16th? 19th, thank you. Second reading will be on that date. And with that, we move to new business, which is an informational discussion on non-potable water system expansion. And who is carrying that one? By the way, I will advise the council and staff that we do have one individual that would like to speak to us following your presentation.
Mr. Mayor, I have a point of order.
Go ahead.
And this is mostly, maybe I'm showing my ignorance, but don't we have to vote on a first reading?
No,
No?
it's just a first reading.
Okay. But we didn't read it.
We read the order. We read we'll talk later.
Okay, we'll
Get that. We'll educate you later.
I feel like I should put a dunce hat on.
Are you ready? And you are?
Karen Hoffman, City Engineer.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. I'm here tonight to talk about the non-potable water system. I do have Brian Ginter with Murray Smith and Associates here if there's any technical questions that you have that I'm not able to answer. So the non-potable water system. The original purpose of evaluating and then constructing a non-potable water system in the city was to reduce the demand for potable water usage for irrigation and other non-drinking water needs. There have been a lot of questions raised over the last year about the non-potable water system, so we requested Murray Smith and Associates, as part of the Water Master Plan, to take a closer look at the entire system. They're about 3/4 of the way through the work on the master plan and the evaluation of the reuse system. And staff wanted to bring the preliminary findings to the council for review and feedback before we go any further on this work. So the non-potable system consists of Otis Springs and the Class A recycled water produced at the wastewater treatment plant. The water can be used for irrigation in most situations and for industrial uses. Otis Springs, which is located near Rex Hill.
Clarification, if I may, what do you mean by industrial uses?
Generally,
What industries can and cannot?
any processing manufacturing facility that might need cooling water or water for their processes. Generally not food-based systems, although in certain instances that could work also. But generally, if you were building chips, microchips or whatever, and they need a lot of water for their process, it could be used there, those types of things.
Thank you.
So Otis Springs is located up near Rex Hill Winery. It provides approximately 0.5 million gallons a day. The system does serve the golf course in the spring and the fall, and it's the backup if the recycled system goes down during the peak summer months. The recycled reuse system is located at the wastewater treatment plant. It's capable of producing 1 million gallons per day. And this system does reduce our summertime discharge from the plant into the Willamette River. And although the system is noted on our DEQ permit, we don't need to run the system in order to meet our discharge permit requirements at this point in time. We are operating on an expired permit with temporary extensions. The conditions could change, we just don't know what those are, and they're probably at least 3 to 5 years out before we'll know what those conditions may or may not be. So there are very specific requirements for the use of recycled water. I'm not going to read this list to you, there's a lot of little words there. But some of them include increased monitoring of the system, making sure there's no turbidity and some other things in the water. It can't be used near a food preparation area. And then signs must be posted where it's going to be used. So if it's going to be used for irrigation in any location, signs have to be posted that recycled water is being used and it's non-potable, don't drink it, those types of things. So our existing system, and this map is a little hard to read, but the existing system goes from the wastewater treatment plant, the recycled system, and goes along Wilsonville Road to line up with a line that CPRD has put in to connect up with the golf course. And then Otis Springs is way up at the top northeast section of that, and there's a red line on your map that takes it down into the golf course also. And then we have a couple other random pieces of what's called purple pipe. They call it purple pipe because the pipe is actually purple and it helps differentiate it between potable and non-potable water. So anytime you see a purple pipe nationwide, it is non-potable water. And so we have some pieces that are not hooked up to anything up at the north end of town. So that's on College at Mountain View and then Springbrook to Mountain View, that area. Those are currently dry lines. So the cost of today's system in total dollars is almost $7 million. That's in capital dollars. The final payment on the loan that was taken out will be paid in 2028. And currently the loan is paid for by both wastewater SDCs, which is paid for by developers, and water SDCs and water rates. The rates charged for the non-potable system pay for the operation and maintenance costs and a portion of the capital construction costs. The rates for the non-potable system is set to decrease in 2017. The council took that action back in April, I believe. The current non-potable rate will cover 6% of the total debt and 22% of the water portion of the debt. So a very small portion of the debt is getting reimbursed back to the city by the user of the system, and because they're not using the entire system or the entire capacity of the system. Therefore, other users are paying the capital costs of the system, other water users within the city. So water allocations and demand. As we've been going through our water master plan, we've been determining what our needs are. How much water do we have? How much water do we need now? And how much do we need in the future? And what we're finding is that we have firm capacity to provide water for build-out or for 20-year planning horizon. So over the next 20 years, we don't see a need to increase our source, other than maybe for some liability purposes and or our treatment plant, other than, again, some pretty minor upgrades. So we don't need a new treatment plant or another well or those types of systems for our potable water system. So the question we're asking tonight is really, should we be looking at an expansion of the non-potable system? The direction we received from the council tonight will be incorporated into the water master plan, which should be completed this fall, and then the wastewater master plan, which is just getting started. There are really three options to look at. Option A, which is the do-nothing, operate as we do today. Option B is a northerly expansion of Otis Springs. And then option C is a full expansion of the non-potable system. So there are very little potential for an industrial customer at this time. As we look through the water users within the city, we don't have any great water users other than the hospital, which can't very easily use non-potable water, and some other things like that. So really what we're looking at is the top irrigation users being the best potential to increase the use of the system. And there are 31 sites within the city that use over 450,000 gallons of irrigation water per year. And most of the sites are in the east and the north portions of the city. So here's a map of the 31 top water irrigation users within the city. And again, as you can see, most of them are in the north and in the east. A couple of other things to keep in mind as we move forward is that right now there's no requirement for property owners to connect to the non-potable system. To make any type of a full-on expansion work, we may need to address that and make that a requirement if the council so chooses. And then to require existing irrigation customers to hook up is going to require extensive revisions to their sites. They have to be completely total new systems, and right now they're all connected. So we would be requiring people to tear up their parking lots, et cetera, in order to have existing customers hook up to the system. So something to keep in mind as we move forward. So again, option A is do nothing. It means CPRD continues to be served by the non-potable system as they do today, Otis Springs and the recycled water, both. And any future users in the vicinity of existing pipes can connect over time as they might become available. So with this one, the estimated revenues right now that we get, and this number is assuming, I just used the 2017 monthly water rates. That seemed to be a real easy way to compare all of the revenue numbers. But estimated irrigation revenues of those customers is $574,000 a year. In this scenario, no additional capital costs are incurred, and the debt service is paid per today's model. So the wastewater SDCs, water SDCs, and water rates would continue to pay for the loan.
Question, if I may,
Certainly.
make sure I'm staying with you. What is the difference between irrigation and non-potable water? You're $6.96 per cubic foot for irrigation.
Right, so
Is that dealing with the purple pipe, or is that
our
irrigation separately?
irrigation is separate per our water
Thank you.
rate structure.
That's what I needed the clarification on. Thank you.
It's actually potable water using for irrigation.
So this is the potable water for irrigation. Thank you. That's what I needed clarification.
So option B is expanding Otis Springs to the north, and then a future use of the recycled system, probably for the Riverfront Master Plan, which I know Doug is moving forward with master planning efforts for that area. and then continuing to serve the golf course. So again, here's a map that kind of shows that system. There's 3 separate pieces of pipe that would need to be constructed through that area. Up here it's A, B, and C, and these are not exact locations of pipe. These are just some conceptual ideas of where those would be. In order to construct this, it would be about $3.7 million. A portion of it that could be paid for by developers, a portion of it by the city in some way or form. And if all of those customers in that location, the existing customers hooked up, we would lose revenues of up to $86,000 approximately. Actually, let me back up here. So here's the cost for the pipe segments and the pumping costs. Each segment has a cost, and then there would be pumping costs that would have to be installed. And then, again, revenues, we would lose about $86,000 worth of revenue. And this isn't really needed until the area, the Graymore site, as Joe noted earlier, is developed, and or the Springbrook Master Plan. The Springbrook Master Plan is required to provide non-potable water to their open space and park areas, but they are also looking at build-out would be another 20 years away. And they are planning to start on the west end of their property and move east, which is somewhat contradictory to where the water actually happens to be, which is on the east side. So that would have to be something that would be talked through to figure out how that would work or when it should work. So option C is a full expansion of the system. And so what you have is 3 different pipe segments to serve, to basically form a loop through the system. There's a yellow line, an orange line, and a blue line. One thing to keep in mind, if you wanted to look at the blue line, it would require either the yellow line or the orange line to be constructed first. And then the storage and pumping costs, to be clear, those are necessary, it's only necessary one time. So if you did the yellow line and you spent the $4.1 million, when you went to do the orange line later, you would not have to do that $1.4 million for storage and pumping again. It would cover it for the entire system. And then I know another question that has come up is to expand the bank of filters in the system to go to our 2 million gallons a day, costs about $1 million. So the total cost for this full expansion is about $10.5 million. There would be a loss of revenue of almost $250,000 a year, again, if existing irrigation customers switched from the existing irrigation line over to this system. And one alternative for option C, this would utilize the existing line through the CPRD site. That would require, obviously, negotiation with CPRD to acquire the pipe and public easements and all of those types of things. The estimated cost for this would be about $1.2 million less than option C. So to summarize, this seemed to be the easiest way to try and put all these costs together to make it clear. So we have the different options with the capital cost per gallon of water, and then the loss of revenue for each one of those options. And what you'll see is obviously option A, do nothing, is zero capital costs, obviously, and we don't lose any revenue through that scenario. Option B for Otis Springs, that's if we assume existing and new customers hook up to the system. It's a capital cost of about 7 cents a gallon, but we could lose revenues up to $86,000. If we look at option B and just look at new customers, so the Springbrook Master Plan area would be the only people that would hook up, or anybody new, Graymore or something along those lines. The capital cost per gallon is $26.43, and the loss of revenue would be 0. Option C, full expansion. Again, capital costs of 14 cents per gallon. The loss of revenue of 245,000 and some change. And then option C, full expansion with new customers only, is about $75 per gallon with no loss of revenue. And then option C is about 13 cents per gallon with a loss of revenue of about $178,000. To implement any option, the capital projects would need to be included in the city's water master plan and wastewater master plan to evaluate any future SDCs that would be adjusted, and then the rates would also have to be modified to include these projects. Depending on what option is chosen is how those costs would be split up. So with that, I know that's a lot of information, and certainly I can come back with additional information if you have questions.
Questions or comments from the council at this juncture? Councilor Woodruff, Councilor Corey, Councilor Essen.
On the last slide that you just showed with the chart, I think maybe this is a redundant question, but all of those columns showed money going away, and there's no column showing revenue coming toward us. Is that correct, that this system doesn't earn any money?
This system earns money. The comparison was what we get today from existing customers. So because the non-potable rate is lower than our existing irrigation rate, we're getting irrigation money and we would get less money in. This did not include any new customers we'd get, because that amount of volume that we would get some revenue from that, but to try and estimate that at this stage in the game would be somewhat.
Councilor Corey?
Yeah, it was basically a follow-on, kind of the same question that I had, and I thought I knew the answer. Now I know the answer. So, but the other side of that, you mentioned the new customers, and the new customers, they would have a higher rate, the new customers that are being added to the system.
If they use the non-potable, or if they use the purple pipe, the non-potable system, they would pay the $2.51. So they would have a lower rate, but it would be additional revenue because they're not paying us
Right.
anything now.
So it would be, so the 85,000 would decrease.
Correct.
I mean, if you want to look at it
Yeah,
that way.
exactly.
Clarification, they would still be hooked up for potable water, would they not?
If they're brand new customers, the assumption is right now if they're not customers at all. So they would be coming onto the system as a brand new customer. So we would get additional revenue from them. So the Springbrook Master Plan area, right now it's relatively vacant land, and so we don't have any revenues necessarily coming in from them for irrigation or any other purpose. So it would be they would be new
I guess I didn't
customers.
understand the question or the answer. Go ahead. Councilor Essen. That did not answer my question, but then
Okay.
I didn't do a good job. Councilor Essen?
Sure. My understanding is that there's a 2017 water permit coming up. Is that true? In other words, we had a 2007 water permit. Did we get at a water committee meeting, I understand that we're taking a look at, or the state of Oregon is going to take a new look at water permits. And it has to do with reuse water. In fact, there were some bonds and things available for that. I guess my question is there any new water permits coming up in 2017?
Not that I'm aware of. There certainly could be. Again, our wastewater discharge permit is currently expired, and we're under a temporary permit along with many, many other jurisdictions around the state. But we've heard it will be 2 to 3 years before we're going to be seeing what our new discharge permit would be. Our water, we have water rights available within our well system, and we are developing those as we speak. We just drilled another well, completed well number 9. So I don't know of any water permit necessarily that's coming up. We're working on our water master plan, and we will have to look at our water conservation plan next year. But that's kind of something we have to do every 10 years, that we submit to the state.
So there's,
Is this a follow-on?
yes, follow on, yeah. There's a discharge water rights issue, is that right? That could be coming up?
No, it's our wastewater discharge permit. So out of our wastewater treatment plant, we discharge effluent into the Willamette River. And we have to have a permit from the Department of Equality, DEQ, thank you. I was trying to.
And then,
And that is expired and we are waiting for a new permit.
and then, follow on. And then there's a water master plan coming up?
Yes, we're working on that right now and we have been for about a year. I think you're on the ad hoc committee for that, Counselor Essen.
Yes.
And we've been on hold while we're trying to get some of these answers with the reuse in order to plug these in. This, where we decided to go with this into the capital projects and into the rest of that plan, so we can finalize that.
One follow. And I also understand that there was a study that was being looked at on wastewater lines having to do with Springbrook. There was a question by Larry Anderson about whether or not we needed a new wastewater line down Springbrook, and we decided no, we did not need that water line, but we were going to do a study. Is that also something that you guys are working on?
That's as part of the wastewater master plan, which the council will see the award of that to our consultant at our next meeting. So we'll get started on that master planning work in the next month or so, hopefully. And so, yeah, we'll be doing a bunch of studies for all of the trunk lines within the city.
Counselor Johnson?
I have a couple of questions, if that's all right. No.
Well, we'll start with one.
Okay, we'll start with one. First off, how can you kind of, in your experience, how important is a non-potable water line to economic development efforts for different cities? Like in Newberg's case, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is this system to economic development efforts if we want to attract businesses that may use this type of water at a lower rate than our potable water?
You may answer that. Is that all right? Ms. Garn?
So-
City manager?
Joe Hand, city manager. So I'm answering for me and for Doug. It can be. And so we've looked at opportunities. And one of the things you don't see up there, and I think people were asking about, well, what if this business came in and used it, and how would that impact? It's specifically not up there because we don't know what kinds of businesses. But, for example, what they've looked at and what Doug and I have asked to look at is that if we extend some of the purple lines, where is the existing line, and let's go to some of the natural places. For economic development in ag, we've contacted Extension and the Department of Agriculture and say, are there some things and some crops we can attract, particularly down Wilsonville Road, to extend these purple lines, because we wouldn't have to go as far. It's always an issue of going outside your urban growth boundary, but we thought ag might do it. So we've asked that, and we're waiting for a response. Some of the things don't need very much water that are over there. Roses do, for example. So we're seeing, is that an opportunity? Then we'll go to those properties that are empty. On manufacturing, then we think, well, what's close? The West Rock site, and as part of that planning, maybe this works for it. What kinds of uses? And we were asking about what kinds of uses might be in manufacturing. Chip is, yes, they use a lot of water. Brewery, you can use water in a process, particularly if you have any large heaters And you could do that. And places that want to put breweries in, for example, they need water that's available and inexpensive. So potentially this could be used for that. Another real dramatic one would be in, you could take either Prineville, or you can take someplace a lot closer, the Dalles, with data farms. So with Google and those folks, in the Dalles, for example, why they located these huge data farms, which are very expensive, great property value, but fewer employees, even though they're high-end, is because they have inexpensive water and inexpensive electricity. So one strategy can be, and I think you talk about that as part of the Riverfront Master Plan and of the West Rock site, but Doug has talked to them all about, is that what about trying to attract a Google farm to here, where we would use reuse water and potentially, and this is kind of going down the road, but if we have cogeneration similar, or at least the concept of cogeneration, but with another source, so instead of the wood products that came in, maybe natural gas, then you could put that kind of use on that site. So those are the kinds of uses that we're looking at.
And your second question?
The second question I had is about currently, and maybe I'm just dense. The way I read this is we have basically one customer for the system right now.
That's correct.
Okay, and follow on?
Follow on?
Do we have a contract with said customer?
No, we do not.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilor McKinney?
Is hydrographics, do they use a non-potable water source, or could they use a non-potable water source?
I didn't catch who you said, Councilor McKinney.
Hydrographics, the people that use water to put, make all the professional helmets, all of the other things that they use water transfer. That's got to be pretty close to that.
They're off of South Springbrook.
Yeah.
It's possible they don't use, based on their water records, they don't use a whole lot of water, but certainly if they wanted to, they could.
That'd be an example. Yeah.
I have a question about option C, option C, full expansion existing and new customers. Its cost per gallon is relatively low. How much of the $245,672 would be recouped by the addition of new customers? I know that that's kind of an unknown, but the $245,000 could be mitigated by new users?
Councilor McKinney? Yes, it could. Most of your new users would generally be in your Riverfront Master Plan, West Rock area, any other expansion areas. We can't assume that we're going to get a UGB expansion, but that may be one way to do that. But going through most of the city, where most of option C goes is actually really along areas that are already developed. So the chances of a redevelopment coming in and creating a lot more revenue on that system is slim, other than, like I said, the West Rock, the Riverfront area certainly could be a big place for that. If the air park came into the city and wanted to somehow redevelop something and use a lot of water for something in that area, that could be a big option. But otherwise, there isn't a whole lot of vacant land that could really use it today within the existing UGB.
Follow on.
Follow on?
With the map that I saw up there, how many parks, schools, churches, great expanses of lawn could avail themselves to this product on a daily basis or at least a weekly basis? I know that Mr. Harris is concerned about customers. It's kind of hard to supply a customer without
Sure.
purple pipe.
Actually, schools and parks are actually already on this list of the 31 top irrigation users. So those are, not all of the parks are in there, but a lot of the schools, all of the schools actually, and several of the parks are already on that list as current irrigation customers.
Agricultural in the north, in the east,
Again,
potential agricultural customers on the north
again,
and the east.
if they're within their UGB, we looked at them, but a lot of the existing agricultural uses already have their own wells. And so whether or not they would hook up unless they were having a problem with their well. And again, if they're within the city limits, they're generally already hooked up to the system.
One last question, Mr. Mayor. If reuse was used appropriately, how much relief comes to our well field and other resources that we depend on for water? I mean, if we were processing 2 million gallons a day, just at our own plant and other things like that, wouldn't there be a substantial benefit to the demands then that we do not place on our well fields and existing water sources? Is it negligible, the benefit, or is it substantial?
So if you developed it out to its full potential and you required everybody to hook their irrigation system up to it, and everybody that we know about, obviously there could be developments that come in, obviously, that could use the non-potable water for something other than irrigation, but that's a really big crystal ball that I don't have. But right now, we're looking at, on the non-potable water demands, we're only looking at about 1.2 MGD. If that was everybody, the top 31 users all hooked up, the Springbrook Master Plan all hooked up for their open space and park areas, Graymore hooked up for, all of their additional landscaping that they're going to be putting in as part of their development and those types of things. So it could reduce what we need to use out of our potable system, but part of that goes back to that consideration I talked about earlier is we don't have a requirement that makes people hook up. So that would have to be something, if the council wanted to go there, that we could certainly look at, writing that into the municipal code, that if non-potable system is available, you shall use it for irrigation purposes. So that could certainly get to existing, whether you could, or to new customers, whether you could make existing customers hook up. That would probably be a question that we would probably have to consult with the city attorney about, just to verify that, because there is a significant cost to those folks also. Although they will be getting a reduced monthly cost, they do have some significant capital costs that they will have to incur in order to hook up and use the non-potable system. So it could, and if it could provide a benefit, but at this point, there is not the need, if that makes sense.
One more?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
If people were compelled to use, if the available line was there, how much would that loss of revenue on that one particular line be reduced? Would it still be $250,000, $250,000, or would it be substantially less? Because the cost per gallon is negligible compared to the other options that we're looking at here.
So I have not run the calculations to see if we only put in the yellow line and all of those folks hooked up, what the change in revenue would be versus if we only ran the orange line and looked at that. I didn't separate it out that way. I looked at it as an entire system. So if that's something that the council chooses me to go back and rerun those calculations, I can certainly do that for the loss of revenue per portion of that system.
Now, you keep referring, excuse me, Mr. Mayor, you keep referring to the yellow line, but it's yellow, orange, and blue.
Right,
That would be the complete loop.
correct. But you could do just the yellow line, or just the orange line, or just, well, you can do just the blue line. You'd have to do the orange or the yellow to get to the blue.
With no blue.
Okay.
Without the orange or the yellow.
That would be correct.
Are there any further questions at this time for staff? For staff?
I do,
For staff?
to staff, just one to staff. So we're talking about if we used Otis Springs, and your recommendation is to use Otis Springs for option 2, we would, if we did the whole system, we'd lose $250,000. But the question is, who would build that system? Would that be on us or, say, the users?
For the Otis Springs system, it would, for any of the systems, it would probably be a combination of the user, a developer that came in and needed to extend, provide the water for their system, and or the city. It could become a capital project for the city if we decided that was important for us to move that forward. The option B, line, that A portion of the project could certainly not be in that location. It could run through Crestview, through the Graymore property, and they have to build that piece through the water line there. And then maybe we have to make the connection through the Oxburg Estates area that's already constructed. So we as a city might have a small piece. And then again, as development occurs on the other side of Crestview, we're doing the project later, possibly pipe goes in that piece of the project as a combination of developer money and city money. There's different ways to go about it, but part of it is figuring out what option we want to move forward on, and then we can look at all of the different assumptions and make the permutations and figure out who would do what piece most likely.
Councilor Johnson.
This is a quick one. So I'm a residential customer. Let's say I get a purple pipe going by my house. I have an irrigation system. I connect into it. Either the city compels me to do that or I do it on my own. Do I still have to have that backflow test every year if I'm on the non-potable system? I'm just curious because it costs money.
I would have to ask the question. My first inclination would be to say no, because the backflow prevention device is for the potable system, not for the non-potable system. But you would have to have a sign in your lawn saying that you're using non-potable water and don't drink it.
I'm going to excuse you for a few minutes, and I'm going to call on Mr. Robert Suppy that would like to address the council briefly. You know the drill, Robert?
Good evening. Thank you. My name is Robert Suppy. I've submitted written testimony for tonight's meeting, but would like to highlight the critical issue of funding for the proposed expansions. I think that the key question with regard to expanding the non-potable water system is, quote, who will pay for the investment? The fact that this question is not raised in tonight's presentation is quite troubling to me, and I think it should be to you. I don't think that putting the question off is wise, as it is crucial to deciding what path to follow. The other important question, the answer to which should guide you to an appropriate answer to the first question, is, quote, who will the expansion benefit? As mentioned in the presentation, expanding the system will result in reduction of revenue to the city. That reduction will come from the form of lower rates for existing irrigation customers who are presently using potable water. While I think it's a good goal to try to lower rates for any users, I think it's inappropriate to require other users to fund the infrastructure that provides those lower rates. More specifically, I don't think that potable water users and future development should be the primary funding sources for an expansion that primarily benefits the users of that expansion, who will be non-potable users. That is what is being done with the present reuse system, contrary to how it was originally proposed. I think that if you look carefully at the history of the reuse system, you'll see why I have such concerns here. The reuse system was never authorized to be constructed. It was not funded as originally planned, and the only customer for it has been dissatisfied with the rate structure for the water until it was dramatically lowered earlier this year. Of course, the expense to non-users of the reuse system, who provide the majority of the funding, didn't receive a reduction in their share of the expense. As you saw in tonight's presentation, the user of the reuse system is paying a very small part of the capital cost. While there are some benefits to the potable water and wastewater systems users, I think the benefit is far less than the benefit to the non-potable water users. This is especially the case with option B that staff is recommending. It should not be too difficult to quantify these benefits and provide you with better data to guide you towards a reasonable direction. I think that you should have had such information tonight before being asked to provide input on whether or not the investigation in the expansion should continue. You may be told that it is premature at this point to address who should be funding the expansion. I strongly disagree with that. If the working assumption were that those who benefit from the expansion were expected to fund it, then I would urge support of moving ahead with planning for the expansion. With no such assumption, I think that the expansion should not be considered. I urge the council to move forward with option A until such time as the funding assumptions can be provided. Lastly, there were concerns raised by council members tonight about the loss of revenue in options B and C. If you do the simple math, these losses are far less than the cost of the options. That's where I think you should have concerns. For example, if you look at the annual loss of revenue in option B, it would take about 38 years to be equal to the cost of the expense of that option. Now keep in mind, they're both going against us, but I think the concern is this expense, not the loss of revenue. If option C, I calculate it's about 45 years. I have far more concern about these expenses than the loss of revenue. Thank you.
Any questions or comments from Mr. Seppi? Thank you, Robert. Appreciate it very much. This is an informational item this evening. There's no action to be taken. I think there may have been some desire for action, but we are taking no action. It is an informational item. And I'll invite staff to come back up and make their closing remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, we were hoping for some direction on which option the council may be going towards so that we can gather more of this information and put it in the water master plan that we want to finish up this fall. But at this point, the staff's recommendation is moving forward with option B. It provides for an expansion of the non-potable system with the least upfront costs and loss of revenue. It also provides for the continued use of the recycled system for the golf course and any possible future users that may be available. And it also potentially reduces our peak summertime potable water demands by 0.22 MGD.
Any further questions or comments from staff? Thank you. Appreciate it. With that, I would the pleasure of the council on this. This is an informational item. Are you prepared? And if you are, then we're going to have, we have not had any deliberations or any previous comment on this. I don't know that you're prepared to make a decision tonight as to what recommendation to go. I'm looking at our city attorney as parliamentarian. This is coming to us as an informational item. Are we in deliberations on it?
There's, Mr. Mayor, Truman Stone City Attorney, there's no resolution or motion or other action pending before the council.
Thank you. Councilor Johnson, did you want to get into this? All right. Forever hold your peace. Then I'm going to move into council business. And the first item that I have before council business is just a follow-up, if I may, on an earlier discussion that we had and a follow-up email that the city attorney shared with you regarding no smoking on city property. Do you, as a council, want to go any further with this and pursue this or not at this juncture? We have just one situation that came up, and that's the picnic table or the lunch table behind City Hall. That's the only issue that has been raised. And Mr. Stone has not found out anything that we thought we had in our memory. That must have been just testimony and not factual. How do you differentiate those? I don't know. But anyway, so do you as a council want to pursue the discussion of having no smoking on city property or specific areas, or do you want to just let it drop for the time being? Maybe I need to ask the question so you don't have an alternative. Do you want to pursue it at this time? Speak up or forever hold your peace tonight. I think you got an answer on that. Long-range financial planning. See if I can get it here. We have, beginning on the evening of September 8th, they will have the first meeting, is we now have a long-term financial planning committee that has been established. The committee members are Matt Zook, will be staff liaison, our city manager, ex officio member, the mayor, ex officio, city attorney, ex officio. Stephen McKinney will be a voting member as our city council. Karen Scott, commercial real estate officer, First Federal Savings and Loan, will be a voting member. Gwen Gardner, chief financial officer, Newberg Public Schools, is a voting member. Sandra Montoya, finance director, now with the city of Woodburn, previously Salem. Rick Rogers, executive director, Newberg Area Habitat for Humanity. And Kathy Try, citizen and former Newberg financial director, make up the long-range financial planning committee, and they will begin their work on September 8th. And some of the areas that they'll be covering is discussions on reserves, revenue, debt, capital activities, operating budget, and purchasing. Thank you, Councilor McKinney, for your willingness to sit on that. I appreciate it very much. We are extending an invitation to the faith-based community to begin the discussion, and I think Councilor Essen should pick up on this one, the discussion about what our faith-based community can do to partner with us, the city, and take the initiative on for their own congregations in emergency preparedness. And we're going to be initiating that. When is the first meeting? I neglected to write it down.
I'm sorry, the second Thursday in the month of October from 7:30 to 9 in this room.
So we'll begin to get that discussion. Now, the city manager earlier did one, and we'll have a larger one, but this is just kind of, we identified the churches, and I'll pass this around. We identified the churches, and then a 2.5 block, is that what it is? 2.5 block circles, and we have, most of the area of the city is covered by one or more of the churches. We do have a couple of areas that are not. So I will pass this around if you want to take a look at it, and it is there. But that will be, and it's going to be a continental breakfast that we will have on that. And are there any questions that any of you have? I would assume that we could invite the council, couldn't we? Should we? Should we invite the council? I think it's okay. We'll invite the council. And the last item I have is Sue confirmed that all candidates for the seats that will be vacant or up for re-election, all candidates, their signatures have been validated. So we have 3 candidates, Councilor Corey, Councilor Bacon, and tell me the name of the lady again, please.
Haley Deli.
Haley Deli, for the vacancy that, what's her name is creating.
What's her name? Boom. Just like that. Wow.
And anyway, we're going to miss Leslie. We're going to miss Leslie, we really are. In spite of everything anybody else says, we're going to miss you. That's all I have. Nothing came up earlier, so unless there is something really pressing, I'm going to be willing to entertain a motion.
To adjourn.
Second.
Seconded. We are adjourned.